So in the case of our Hemi GTX, it's a 1967 factory 426 Hemi. It's a 4-speed car. So the minute that becomes a 4-speed car, you have 2 axle packages that you can choose from. You can choose from the A33, which would give you a 3.54 to 1 gear ratio axle, which was what we call the Dana 60 rear axle. It's a sure grip. Or the A34, which would give you 410 gears in the back, 4.10 gear ratio. So for 69 and 70 in your Mopars, if you had a 440 cubic inch engine or a 426 Hemi, and even on the 440 you could have had a 6-pack, 6-barrel, or just a 4-barrel, wouldn't have mattered, you would have got what they call the Hemi 4-speed, which was an 18-spline input shaft. The coarser the splines on the input shaft, the tougher the transmission. The bearings are a little bit bigger in that transmission as well. You also got mandatory Dana rear axle. That's the 9 3/4 inch ring gear on a sheer grip chassis. And you'll notice the size of it. This projects a little further on the Dana than it does on the 8 3/4. That means your drive shaft is also special for an 8 3/4 versus a Dana. A lot of people think, well, you can use the same drive shaft. It's a little bit shorter on a Dana because of how far the pinion projects. Another quick way that you can tell if you're Dana just looking underneath the car is look at the rear cover. An 8 3/4 rear axle assembly, which you could not get behind a 440 or a 426 Hemi. The last engine group you could have got a 23 spline 8 3/4 rear axle was behind the 383 or the 472. This pan you'll notice unbolts from the rear. It uses 10 bolts, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 bolts that hold this cover on. An 8 3/4 is a housing that has no removable rear cover. You drop the carrier out the front. They call that a pumpkin unit or a pig unit. So the Dana, quickest thing you can do is look and see if you got 10 bolts holding it on there. That tells you it's a Dana looking at it. After that, you can look for ID tags that say whether it's 354 or 410, and we learned that that's the difference between an A33 and an A34 package. In addition to getting the Dana rear axle and the 18 spline input Hemi 4-speed transmission, you got a few other things. With a track pack, A33 or A34, 69 through 71, guaranteed you the 26-inch max cooling package. That means that you got a 26-inch radiator core. You also got a 7-blade torque drive fan. Those were mandatory. You got heavy-duty suspension, and in the case where you didn't get disc brakes as an option, you would have got heavy-duty drum brakes. In the 70 E-body, 70 and 71 E-body, if you got an A33, tells us already it's the 18-spline input Hemi 4-speed, the Dana rear axle assembly. The A33, you had optional disc brakes on the front. On the A34, you got mandatory. You had a 410 gear ratio rear axle on the 410, you would have gotten disc brakes in the front. That immediately took the 11x3 heavy-duty drums off, gave you a 10-inch rear brake and a disc brake in the front. So if you've got a 410 Dana sitting out in a yard somewhere and you walk up to it, if it's out of a 70 or 71 E-body, it has to have 10-inch brakes in the back, not 11, because that was mandatory with the 410 gears on the A34 axle package. A lot of you guys will probably have to write this stuff down, but I just, kind of get it right off the top of my head like that. Another interesting fact too, in 1970, even though you got a 426 Hemi cubic inch putting out 425 horsepower, the clutch diameter was dropped from 11 inches in 1969 to 10.5 inches. Don't know why. It also went to an aluminum bell housing from a cast iron bell housing. So basically what we're talking about is starting at the front, if you've got an axle package car, it's a 4-speed, it's a Mopar, it's 1969, 1970, 1971, those axle groups mean something to the rest of the vehicle relative to what transmission it got, what rear axle it got, then what brakes it got, what heavy-duty cooling and suspension it got. Those are all indicative of those alphanumeric codes that are on the fender tag, A33, A34, and that's just dealing with the 4-speed transmissions. I mean, I could go on for hours like this. I can give you all you want. Cut.